afterwards. So, welcome everyone. A quick expert workshop, let's say, let's call it expert level workshop around insights discovery, but through the lens of teams. So through the lens of how you can maximize team potential by using insights as a route to do that. Insights has its very own team effectiveness model. So you've probably seen this one before over my shoulder, the 72 type model, and you may remember where you fall out on that. You certainly should remember which section you were in, I would think. But this is taking insights to a slightly different level and in a slightly different direction. Now, there are many step 2s, 3s, or 4s that you could do if you're a practitioner with a team, or if you manage a team, where you could take your team in terms of further exploration around what insights is and what it does. We have loads of different options at Blue Canoe. We'll often focus on things like understanding stress responses and how your insights preferences might react during stress. Looking at leadership effectiveness, as Claire might know, we kind of weave that through some of our leadership programs that Claire's a participant on right now. And from a practitioner perspective, you'll decide for your own clients, your own journey around when it's the right time, if it's the right time to bring team effectiveness in. But it certainly wouldn't be a day one thing in my experience using insights. So what am I going to cover today? A little quick hello and welcome. What is Insights Team Effectiveness? If you've never seen it before, chances are you haven't, because dare I say it, most people that use Insights get their personal profile, they have a lovely time doing that, and then the danger is it can be kind of put away in a drawer and never used again. So that's why we try to have a step 2, 3, 4. So we'll learn a bit, quite a lot about what is team effectiveness. We'll talk briefly about, well, what benefits does it bring to teams, but you'll start to have those little kind of popcorn moments yourself around, as we go through. So if you feel like sharing those in the group, please do, because we're a really small group today. And then a bit about, well, what next? How can I use this going forward? Does that all sound fair? Yeah. We won't bother with intros because it's kind of a broadcast rather than a thing, but I would love it if at various points throughout, if you want to come off mute and say something or challenge me with a question, please feel free to do that, because it's always better when it's interactive. So Insights Team Effectiveness is a slightly different model than Insights Discovery. So it's a definite deeper layer. And I'm just going to dive right into it and show you the kind of headlines. So you'll remember that fiery red with an individual is all usually know what they want and where they're going to get it from, and they'll go out and find it in a very determined way, usually. Within the team model, fiery red turns into focus. So what's the focus for the team? Does the team understand the vision, the strategy, the goals, where it's headed and what's happening? And we need enough of that within teams in order for them to be effective and successful. So you'll notice that all of these are slightly different, or there's a slightly different lens than from the personal model, which I'll explain as I go. So fiery red turns into focus. What's the focus for the team? Are we clear about that? Do we know it? As we go clockwise around into sunshine yellow, we know that that's normally the one that I like to call the kind of jazz hands energy. It's the vibrant social connection within the team. It's the individuals that are making sure people are connected. For a team, though, it turns into this lovely concept of flow. So you'll know for yourself personally when you've been part of a team that is in flow, and teams just kind of get it. So like the water running down the hill, how does the team flush? How does the team come down the hill? Is it really bumpy and oh gosh, and we kind of struggle when obstacles come along, or when we have to change direction, it can be a bit clumsy? Or actually, is the team really agile and collaborative in how they work together? So what's the flow for the team? I love that kind of analogy of the water coming down the hill. You know, is the team in flow? Does the team have enough access to a flow state? As we cross the center line and head towards the other side of the wheel, all that lovely earth green energy, which we know comes from a steady state, a real focus on people, but a depth of relationship this time. So not as broad as sunshine yellow, a far more in-depth trusting relationship coming from earth green energy for individuals, but in the team, earth green energy turns into the climate. So how does it feel to work here? Do we all trust each other? Can the team come together to collectively solve problems? What does that look like? Is it harmonious within our team? And then to close the loop, that lovely cool blue energy, which we know is the home of data and research and information, and kind of getting to correct, a real preference for correctness, coming from cool blue. In a team situation, cool blue energy turns into process. So does the team have enough access to, does the team understand enough about, well, what are our processes around here? How are things done? How do we measure with explicitness and clarity how good we are, or what our working methods are, or our simply systems and processes? That's all coming from a cool blue place. And as you would expect, I mean, I like to kind of think about this model less as a kind of tabletop for a team. And in any team, we want the tabletop to be as level as possible. So if you imagine the table's got 4 legs, if any one of those legs is too high, the things on the tabletop are going to start to slide. And if any one of those table legs is too low, the things on the tabletop are going to start to slide off as well. So it's not that we want to stick to a steady state and stay there forever. It's that we need things to be roughly in balance with each other. And remember, it'll always be pulsing and changing in the same way that your insights preferences are always pulsing and changing. But we want to see some representation from all 4 pillars, if you want, of the team effectiveness model. All right. So that's a load of information I've just thrown at you. I'm gonna go into more detail, fear not. But I'm curious, like, how's that sounding straight off the bat, given you've all got an insights profile, you're all roughly familiar with the language? Like, where's your head gone listening to that very brief intro?
I'll jump in. I guess, yeah, I was just trying to think of the makeup of the team. With the focus, feels naturally like they are going to be more of the leader versus some of the rest of the team.
Yeah,
Is where I was
maybe.
at.
That's
But,
one way of thinking about it. Might challenge that a little bit. We don't always need to look to the leader to get the focus, but yeah, maybe it's
mm,
coming from there. It could
mm.
be in a lot of kind of hierarchical organizations, maybe. Ali, how about you?
Yeah, same. That's sort of sitting well. I mean, I know my team are very heavily into their insights profiles, so I do know where they are. And we're led by Yellow. Our team lead
Yeah.
is Yellow.
Yeah.
But with a lot of support from, it's not that in actually functioning, we all almost have an equal sort of stake in that, in how, and that's what this is, isn't it? It's how it functions, not what it's doing,
Yeah,
how it will.
exactly. And it's a really important distinction, because just because we might have a team full of people who lead with, I don't know, let's pick one, Earth Green Energy, doesn't mean that the climate cohesion and trust in the team are going to be high. So we have to get away from those assumptions that, oh, because someone in the team has high fiery red energy, well, the focus is fine and everyone gets it. It's a different dynamic that we're looking, it's a different lens that we're looking at the team through. And I think teams are often surprised, like, oh, we've got a gap on that one, but actually we've got representation on the wheel for that one, but it's 2 different things. And one of the questions I'm often asking myself is, well, who's in charge of how effective the team is? Because some people's instinctive response might be, well, the leader is. Well, actually, I'd argue that we're all accountable for how effective the team is. It's about stuff. What are they bringing? Because it's not necessarily a direct correlation from color preference into team effectiveness. Jonathan, you came off mute.
Yeah, Elaine, I've used this many times. I've run it for about 14 different teams, and it was 3 years into our process. So we started with insights discovery the first year, then we did sales effectiveness the second year, and this was the 3rd step. So I agree 100% with you. This is not something you do as a starter. But what was even more interesting, we did this by individual in a team, and I captured the data on an Excel spreadsheet. So we had individual scores, but we also had the average for the team, and I can share the spreadsheets I used if anybody would be interested. But what was interesting is the individuals' scores had no reflection on their preference from an insights color. It was all about how they saw the team and where they saw it working or not working. So
Yeah.
a very, very powerful tool that then led into very detailed action plans that people could deliver on their team. And of course, the leader would lead on that plan, but would have individual contributions from everybody having to be considered and delivered.
Yeah. And did you do that with your spreadsheet, Jonathan? Did you do that by the 4 pillars, so by focus, flow, climate, and process, or did you
Yes.
do it at more depth than that?
No, more depth. We actually went all the way
Yeah.
down to shared purpose, trust,
Yeah. Yeah.
agility. And
Yeah.
what is interesting for us, if there was no trust, there was basically no team. So, which reflected in the wide variety of scores and the views of people, because it
Yeah.
becomes a very honest discussion that leads on from that feedback. It's really honest discussion, trying to
Yeah.
understand and get under the skin of what people are saying. So politically, it becomes quite harsh, and there has to be a level of trust. If there isn't, it becomes very evident in the discussion that's had.
Yeah, and I guess there's a few ways of doing that. Like your way's really good in terms of like a collection of scores almost prior to an intervention. I'm imagining that was. One thing that I love to do in the training room, just from facilitator to facilitator, is to get people to write privately for themselves what they think their scores are. And then almost as a like surprise, guess what? Now we're going to share it. So I might get them to write on individual post-it notes their score out of 5 or out of 10 for either each of the 4 pillars or each of the 8 kind of sections, if you will, or there's the full model, which I'm going to get to in a minute. You can really pick, if you know where the particular strengths of the team might be or the particular areas of focus for the team might be, you can be really intentional about where you get those scores from and exactly where you want to measure. And I do that in the training room, only with teams where there's some level of psychological safety though, and it's certainly not a day one thing. You know, kind of let's be clear about that. Sam?
Yeah, no, it's really good to hear from other people as well. Like we're definitely entering the second step, so we're going into team effectiveness now. Funnily enough,
Yeah.
first workshop is Monday, hence why this
Oh,
call was
wow.
kind of coming in at kind of a time. So that's why I was here. But I always found, I don't know about you guys, I definitely have a favorite page in the insights profile I use with people. I guess they're all great, but I love the ideal environment page, and I think that
Yeah.
page for me really helps show managers especially and teams if there's any trust there, because if you do an activity around that and people are like, whoa, I'm not going to share that, I need more of that or whatever, I think it very much in the first step shows you need to do a lot of work on trust before we jump towards team effectiveness and stuff. So
Yeah,
that's just definitely around there.
exactly. And it's also making sure that the team effectiveness stuff is coming at the team at the opportune moment. And as a leader of a team or as a facilitator or even as a team member, you'll kind of know when the right moments are. And sometimes it might be that a team's about to enter into some transition, like some change, and it could be that we want to wait for that change to settle a bit before we look at team effectiveness. Or I'd actually counter that view and argue with myself a little bit about that. There never really is a perfect time for a team because we're always in transition. So if we can't have these conversations whilst we're in transition, we'll probably never have these conversations. So it's kind of, it's I can argue both sides of the coin. Jonathan, go on.
Just an important point to consider here, folks, especially in a sales team where people see each other as competitors. It actually becomes a major issue because you're not releasing that integration of the team where they can actually help one another. And it's trying to help them see that their competition's not internally, albeit
Yeah.
that they're fighting for awards internally. Their success is about how they compete with their competitors on their respective territories in order for them to be the best. So
Yeah,
it's ironic how
exactly.
they see each other and who's the team and who's the competition for them to beat.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a mindset thing. It's yeah, it's a mindset thing. Because I think we can all lift each other up, right? Like especially in a sales environment, if someone's performing well, we can all do more to learn from that person or observe what that person's doing that works. And yeah, share that success. I think but that takes a real abundant mindset to appreciate that I'm not in competition. There's actually enough for everyone. Not everyone has that. I have an abundant mindset, but not everyone does, sadly. So there's a bit more detail to kind of show you about this, which if you are a practitioner, you'll have this in your materials pack. You can use these as much or as little as you wish, but essentially I've given you my view. There are, Insights have defined what they believe are the metrics, if you wish. And I know we've started in process, so how appropriate. But what I tend to do with teams when I'm working with them at this stage, and we've sort of explored the initial part of the model, and maybe this is where we start to do some of that scoring that you were mentioning, Jonathan. People kind of need a bit of clarity and explicitness, don't they, around, well, what am I scoring us against? So you could use insights definitions of the 4 pillars of team effectiveness, or what I find better is to get the team to define what it means for them. So this is what insights define as process, but what does that mean in our team? Because it's not always the same thing. We can use these as some guiding points, some North Stars, but it doesn't have to be correct. So again, part of your team effectiveness journey could be to ask the team themselves, well, what does process mean to you? How does this come alive for you? So use these with caution, I would say, because they're there to be helpful. If they're not helpful, you can skip over them. So I'm not going to read these out to you, but my invitation as we go through to all of you is to consider the team that you're currently a member of, and to notice, oh, hang on a minute, do I think we're doing this particularly well or not particularly well? Because we'll then start to see where the high scores or low scores might be. So in this slide deck, it goes back to front, so anti-clockwise, beginning with Cool Blue process, all about that mix of capability, decision-making process. So it's not about who's the decision maker, it's about how do we know where the processes go. So again, let's not get confused with decisions only coming from fiery red, which is a very natural assumption. Nope, we need a clear process that everyone knows to follow for decision making. In climate, I don't think any of this is a particular surprise, but again, reflect for yourself, the team that you're currently part of, how do you measure trust? How do we know if trust is there or not? Because we're all measuring trust in such a unique and personal way based on what trust means to us. Your organization might measure engagement and motivation. There might be scores on that kind of stuff, or there might not be. So again, how does the team that you're working with or the team that you're part of view this idea of climate? And I think one of the really interesting things is the acid test that's mentioned on the 4th bullet point here for cohesiveness is all around, well, cohesiveness is all well and good when things are going great, but how does the team respond when there's pressure? How does the team respond when it's not fantastic all the time? Because we need to get into that. Like, it's all very well, yeah, we're all great and lovely, but when the rubber hits the road or the shit hits the fan, it's a little different, isn't it? Like we can feel it. Does climate mean for them? Flow, this is that lovely diagram of the water coming down the hill. When a team is in flow, they're likely to do these things. It's all about responsiveness and agility, solutions and solving problems together, talking about it, and change, like this kind of real pro-change attitude coming from flow. Notice that change wasn't mentioned in the opposite, which is process. And again, I think if you've been part of an insights discovery session before, if you facilitate insights discovery sessions, you'll know the importance of the opposites within insights. And I think it's not to be ignored in the team effectiveness model that process offers up something very different than flow. So it's about being really intentional, noticing that for and with the teams that you get to work with. So again, how's flow in the team that you're part of? And then finishing off with focus. Do we know the direction, vision, and goals? What are the right things, and how do we define those? Do we define those through a lens of Earth Green Energy, our values, or do we decide those through our targets and our KPIs? Two very different definitions of what the right things are. And many organizations, the organization that Claire's been a part of, they measure success through doing the right thing in terms of values rather than always doing the right thing in terms of KPIs. And that's a really refreshing difference that we get to work alongside. So, you know, are people accountable for what they commit to? Do they do what they say they're going to do? And do we know what that is? Is that clear? Are we relying on one person for focus, or are we all collectively accountable and responsible for focus in the team? So you might want to explore those things with and for your team members. You might want to get them to decide what focus means for them, and then to follow Jonathan's train of thought. At some point in a team effectiveness session, if I was running it for you, I'd be asking the team to do some self-reflection about, well, where are we here? Do we have a balanced tabletop, or do we have a slidey tabletop? And what differences are there in perception? Because if we know anything from Insights Discovery Level 1, perception is king. And the way I see it is my reality, my truth. The way my team members see it is their reality, their truth. So we want to invite that discussion into the room. There are many, many safe ways we could do that. And if you've checked out the Insights learning materials, you'll know that they have a few nice conversation starters around, if this team were a fruit, what fruit would this team be? I personally think some of that's a little bit, it wouldn't go down so well with some of my clients. Some of them you can get a bit caught up in geopolitical nonsense, like if this team was a country, what team would it be? Like, oh, avoid. I personally wouldn't go there. But Insights have some nice activities. I personally think as well, and Jonathan, we would have done this on our practitioner teams profiles. You don't need a facilitator to come in, and you can talk about this within your team, but you could do a lovely exercise which is like colorful lineups. So if everyone's got their own profile, well, we might want to, let's get to know each. We know what the profile is. I might know what my wheel position is. I probably know what my order of energies are. I might even have a little stack of bricks on my desk. But do we know intensity of energy? So if we got the team to line up, and intensity is super important, but often overlooked in insight sessions. You know, if we got the team to line up from least to most for each of the color energies in turn, what does that look like? And how does it show up? Because that will help us give a lens to the perceptions that we have. So a nice entry point into talking about teams is to look at, well, what intensity do we have? Because I might lead with sunshine yellow and it might be ridiculously high. My team member might also lead with sunshine yellow, but their intensity might be a lot less than mine. It could be 20-30% lower. We need to know that. The order of energies doesn't help enough. Okay. My next slide is the full team effectiveness model. I'm not a massive fan of how Insights have formatted this, because you kind of have to do this. You kind of have to twist your head in an upside downy kind of fashion to read it. And even if you've got the floor mat of this, if you're a practitioner, it's still kind of upside down to someone at every point, which is really annoying to me personally. But this is really lovely to have on the floor when working with a team, because it offers a bit of richness to the discussion, in terms of, if we're not sure about shared purpose, but do you know what, we can have a really great conversation about something like potency and belief. Well, how much do we believe in it, and how much is our action towards a thing? How potent are we? That can really clarify the difference between shared purpose and results orientation for people, to see these sort of additional layers in the model. So I'm going to leave that there for a sec, and I'm going to invite some questions. Like, have a look at the words. Is there anything you're not sure about? Is there anything you think, well, what's that doing there? Or anything you want to question? And you might have to do a bit of this to be able to read it all. Or is that all kind of super clear and obvious?
No, I do have the mat. It's yet to be used, but it will be on Monday, which is good fun. I know what you mean about the moving of your heads, which is really annoying. But no, it all makes you know, a lot of sense to myself. I think the one that always interesting, like talking to people, like if you've got like a lot of earth green energy, for example, they look at it and they're like, conflict. Well, we hate conflict. Like, we don't want to do that kind of thing, and it's trying to obviously that kind of stuff. So no, it makes full sense to me. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of points, obviously, so you aren't going to cover all of them in the session, so it's kind of getting them to discuss
them
what
to
are the key.
focus.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you might want your teams that you're working with, Sam, to focus more on what are our strengths and how do we grow them, or you might want to focus on what are your gaps and how do you fill them. Both ways work, but it's really interesting your point about Earth Green being conflict avoiding, and I think you're absolutely right that that is a general trait from people who lead with Earth Green energy. However, it's also the kind of the negative effects on that, on cohesion and trust in the team. If we have a team that are aware of conflict but constantly do not have the important conversations, constantly avoid the tricky issue, the tricky thing, the tricky piece of feedback that needs to be given, actually that is more detrimental to climate within the team than engaging a little bit of assertiveness, perhaps coming from fiery red or sunshine yellow somewhere else, to have those tricky conversations. So again, and that's why it's super important to land that point that just because we might have loads and loads of Earth Green energy, if we have bad day Earth Green energy, then climate is not going to be high. The climate's going to be poor, probably, because people are more likely to avoid the tricky thing. So yeah, super important. What else? Other questions, comments, reflections? It's always good to let the tumbleweed roll for a sec. Just let it fly through. I mean, it's a lot today. Like we've intentionally said in the joining stuff of the webinar, like this is definitely a second, third, fourth time out with insight, but it's a step worth taking, because why bother? Why would you bother doing team effectiveness with groups? Because we've all got our profiles, right? But it's very different. It's very different. I bring my profile to my team. How I live my profile is my personality, and that collective personality and preference together kind of creates the energy within the team. So I just wanted to really briefly touch on the benefits of using team effectiveness, specifically bringing to teams. And some of them are quite similar than the benefits of just using insights, but with a bit more focus. So you're definitely getting a common language. So if we can talk about team effectiveness and not about individuals, so if we can talk about process, focus, climate, and flow, might need more of this. Not, come on, Sally, get your finger out. We need you to do more of that. So it gives a lovely safety around looking at the thing in a third party context. So let's look, it's almost like we can fishbowl it. We can put it over there and we can have a safe conversation about our team as if it was an object we were looking at, rather than making it personal about the individuals in the team and how they show up. That helps with psychological safety. So people need to feel like they're in it and not being criticized as part of it. So it's that common language, changing it from fiery red, sunshine yellow, earth green, and cool blue to process, focus, climate, and flow. Then we need to be able to spot it in others. So what strengths do other people bring to our team? Who are the people that we might rely on? So we know that we want to recognize preferences from others. We first have to look at self. So what am I bringing to the team? How do I contribute to process, focus, climate, and flow? What am I actively ignoring a quadrant that I might need to pay more attention to? And why is that? What is it about my contribution to teams in the past that's leading that? Or why am I intentionally withholding that from this team? So first of all, we need to look at self. What do I bring? What do I not bring? But then we need to look at others. What are my co-workers' styles and preferences, but not just red, yellow, green, blue, contribution to the team. So it's a different conversation, different lens. And then you recognize this, the adaptability bit. So if I know that, what's my ask of the team in order for us to be more effective? If I were leading the team, what do I need from my team to be more effective in the one where we have a deficit? Or what do I need to kind of keep it all in check, keep it all in balance, remembering that it's constantly pulsing and changing all the time? So we would hope to see some improved connections with teammates, because we'll be giving attention to those needs and gaps within the team, not looking at personal profile, because everyone's personal profile is perfect, it's theirs. But when we look at team, we can look at needs and gaps. We're not, we are looking through a different source. So those are the benefits. I always try and show a team wheel whenever I'm talking about insights. So this is my team. You'll see some of us, you'll recognize some of our initials in there, which is just fine. No one minds me sharing this. But again, you would be, if you looked at our team at first glance, you'd see high levels of sunshine yellow energy because we're all facilitating in front of clients regularly. However, not everyone does. So Claire will know that Nicola, that I was working with yesterday, you can see Nicola's initials over here. She's very much not in a sunshine yellow space. So Nicola would have gone home after a day like yesterday that we spent with Claire, feeling absolutely exhausted from extrovert. She's motivated by making a difference to people. So it would be really wrong of us to look at our team and go, well, look, high levels of sunshine yellow energy, that must equal high levels of flow, collaboration, and agility. That doesn't mean we've got strengths in those areas. So we need to have that conversation. The surprise for our team, when you look at the wheel on the left, is you assume, well, hang on a minute, we've only got one person leading with fiery red energy at the moment. You assume it's our lowest preference, which is what it's shown here in this dominant pie chart. Just one of us, 11% of our team, has fiery red highest. However, when we look at preferred energy, which takes into account everything above the line, and everything above the line does equal a strength to some degree for the people with it above the line, you can actually see that a fiery red takes over from sunshine yellow as our most dominant preference. So how is it to work in a team that has dominant fiery red energy, but not on first glance? And how does that affect our ability to focus? If we've got too many chiefs and not enough Indians, potentially, we absolutely don't. But it's a good question to throw into a room full of people. There are many, many questions we could throw in about, well, how does that show up? And if we're also assertively going about doing our business together, what does that mean? Does it take away from our collaboration in sunshine yellow, in flow, or does it have a negative effect on trust? I would hope that it doesn't, but of course I'm the leader of this particular team, so I've got my very own biases and views about it. So I don't know, like, what's your thoughts on that? Because a team wheel really helps us to, it's a nice entry point into a team effectiveness conversation, but it isn't the answer to team effectiveness. So I just wonder what your thoughts and comments are on that.
I guess it's coming into this fairly fresh, but this is really interesting because I've found, so when we did the team, when we looked at the team, when we did this a long time ago, there was a lot of people sat in the green and the blue. And I've always wondered, like, the impact on the team, the heavily weightedness on that. But I had never considered like that second preference.
Yeah.
And the impact that probably has.
Second and third sometimes. So if you look at this little chart up here is super helpful. The little slashy line in the middle is the midpoint line in someone's graph, in their conscious graph. And everything above that line, or in this instance, everything to the left of that line, is a strength. And for 3 people in my team, because they're in this accommodating circle right in the center, means they've got 3 out of 4 that they're actively choosing as strengths. So sometimes it's not just the top 2, it's the top 3 that we need to look at. And that's what this preferred energy pie, or sometimes it's called the inclined, from insights discovery personal profiles into insights discovery team effectiveness, to have this little pit stop of a team wheel in the middle to kind of really get under the skin of that. And you could spend days looking, I mean, literal a team, because they're really invested in the progress and the success of the team, right? So you can spend an awful long time. Sometimes I've worked with teams that spend 2 or 3 hours just with this one piece of kit, having a look at, how do we all show up and what's the impact of that? Sam, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's from my point of view, it's very refreshing to see that, like, all the stuff I'm doing is like stuff that's obviously recommended to do as well. Like, the team wheel activity is so amazing. I especially love when you do bring up that second inclined energy, and there's suddenly people just don't talk for like a minute, and they're like, "What do you mean we have all this sort of above?" And it's just really interesting to see people's point of view. And again, like you spoke about, because I love obviously the bricks and all that kind of good stuff. But my pet peeve is that when people look at it, they think 100%, 75, 50, 25. And I always say, well, actually, you need to look at the graphs and what's where and get 4 very close or whatever. But I love doing the activity where, you get people stood around the wheel. Again, we do it with the team wheel thing and say, look, stand in your number 1 preference. And they'll stand, obviously, opposite some people. And they'll go move to your second and they actually meet there. I think that's kind of trying to paint the picture of them. Actually, maybe you've got more in common than you think in the way that you think and the way that you can do things. And maybe the connection can be there. But I've always found the team wheel really, it kind of takes them back a bit in a good way. And they have really, really good conversations. It's a really great tool.
Yeah. And it's a lovely bridge between insights discovery personal profiles and insights discovery let's go deeper, or let's go, I wouldn't even, is it deeper, is it just different? It's a different way of looking at it, and you may never get to team effectiveness. A lot of companies that we work with just stick at personal profiles, and so long as they're getting benefit from that, there's no harm in that. But I also think the profiles cost a lot of money. They're not cheap, and actually once you've got it, it's a real missed opportunity to not then bring it out and use it again, because to run a team effectiveness workshop, you just need a facilitator. The profiles are already done, presumably, so it's not costly from a
resource.
Exactly, from a resource perspective. Thanks, Jonathan. What were you going to add, Jonathan?
For me, it just shows that insights gives you a real richness. So this preferred energy makes us all realize most of us are rainbows. We're not just one color. And I think that's so important, because it also stops this pigeoning of people of, I'm blue, I'm red, I'm yellow, I'm green. No, you're not. You have multiple color energies. So use that richness and contribute it to yourself and to the team.
Absolutely, and that's what we want to avoid, right? Is any kind of stereotype, or we're a team who, and it's it's not about leadership in fiery red. It's about shared and equal responsibility across the team to make sure that we have everything that we need in order to be successful. And one of the questions I'm often asked at team effectiveness sessions is, well, what are you looking for, Elaine? Like, do you want a team that is, equal? Like, do you want 25% in each quadrant? And my initial response to that question, or my provocation back to the team, is, well, what's the purpose of this team? Because 25% might look good from a data perspective, but if I don't know, if it's a team of accountants, do you want 25% of all of them? Or what's the benefit to the team of having that high or low preference? I would say you're always looking for some kind of balance. I'll go back to my tabletop, but that doesn't come from individual profiles. That comes from how are we stacking up against the team effectiveness model, not from I'm looking for a team of equal identities, which is one of the reasons, just FYI, one of the reasons why insights discovery should never be used as a recruitment tool. Never, ever, ever. And I hear some really bad practice from various organizations about, oh, we need to recruit someone with cool blue energy because we're really short on that. It's like, please don't. Please recruit for skills and capability. Preference will bring another part of a jigsaw puzzle that you didn't even know you needed. But we should never be recruiting based on preferences. I would only ever want to be recruited on my ability to do the job and my skills to show that I can do it, rather than my preferences, because they're just preferences, right? They don't define me. They're not my life. They're just things I like to knock off my to-do list first, really. Okay, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to be quick and get to the end of my slides. My favorite slide in the whole insights repertoire, this lovely chameleon. Individuals need to be chameleonic, so we want individuals to take small steps towards preferences they may not usually, in order to make better connections with their teammates. But we also need people to take intentional steps whilst being chameleonic into different areas of the team. So actually, I may never realize that my contribution to the team could be detrimental in one of those 4 pillars of team effectiveness. Hearing that and knowing that might help me to understand, oh, actually, when I'm working with these people, I need to be more of or less of something. Well, what is that? And if we're not having those open conversations, how would we ever know? So, bear that in mind. Like, where's your chameleon at with the team that you're part of? So a little quick tip from me in terms of how you can use this. I said it when I was talking through the bullet points, like, consider the team that you're in. Consider for yourself, What's the balance? What do you see a lot of? You don't need to see people's profiles to do a team effectiveness analysis. You can go back to process, focus, climate, and flow, and those words around the edge. And if there is a team either in chaos or a team in conflict, that something is missing or something is being overplayed. And usually then we can do a bit of root cause analysis about, well, why is that? And what do we need to do to manage it? So that's my offer to you, is after today, have a bit of a reflect about the teams that you show up in and how effective they are, and use that kind of language. You don't need the profiles to kind of have a good conversation about effectiveness within a team. I can't share the materials with people that aren't practitioners, so please don't ask me for the slides. That's not allowed. Sam and Jonathan, you've probably already got them, but I tell you what, Insights are really active on LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest, and other places. So if you just go to those places and type in team effectiveness, you'll find their stuff. They put it out there. So I'm not allowed to share it with you, but you can certainly find it yourself. I don't think this is relevant to any of you because you all have your own Insights profile already. But if we did have a room full of people that didn't have an Insights profile, we've got a webinar offer for them. Or if you're thinking of doing team effectiveness with your team, you can use that link. I don't know how you click that link. Maybe I should have made it a hyperlink. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You know where I am. If you want to have a different conversation with me about using team effectiveness in your team or about learning more about it, you've got my email address. We've met now if we hadn't met before. So, please drop me a line. We haven't got another webinar planned as yet, but for those of you, Jonathan, you've been along the ride on all of them. We do these little webinar series from time to time to share our knowledge with people like you, and you'll find out about those by following our LinkedIn page. So if you don't already do that, please do look for Blue Gnu Consulting on LinkedIn. That's where we advertise this kind of stuff and where you probably saw it to get the link. So thank you. It's 16 minutes past 1. Enzo, do you mind stopping the recording for me?